Hello and welcome to GPTV on the most beautiful Tuesday, the 6th of June. My name's Philip Kingston.
And I'm Gary Pearce. Is it really beautiful?
Well, you know, it's beautiful, Gary. Every day that I wake up and put my 2 feet on the floor and actually move my body out of the bed, that's a good day, Gary.
That's what they call an attitude of gratitude, Phil. Can only be good for you.
An attitude of gratitude. I think that's the first time we've ever used that little saying on GPTV. But I do like it. And I think that shout out to Sally Zellman, who watches this show and often appears in the show, but she is the one that personifies an attitude of gratitude.
She does. Lives and breathes it, Phil, every day.
And as I like to say to our sales team, Gary, on a regular basis, where there's sometimes, you know, they pass something in or something didn't go right, I say to them, we should be always grateful because we won the geographic lottery when we were born into this country, because 99% of the world's population would swap lives with us in a heartbeat. And if you think about that, viewers, just suck that in for a moment. There's 1.6 billion people that live in China. No disrespect to China, of course, because we don't want to say anything negative, but I'm sure most of them would like to live in Australia. There's 1.5 billion Indians, Gary. There's no question. They come to this country and they can't believe how good it is.
Yeah, but do you reckon they want to be real estate agents, have to work evenings,
I didn't say they wanted to swap lives with you or me, but they would love to live in this country because Australia, regardless of who is in government, whether it be Liberal, Labor, all those pesky Greens, the bottom line is this is the best place on the planet in which to live.
The Fisherman's Party and the Nationals.
The Fisherman and Choosers Party.
Yeah, exactly. I can't leave them out.
Those teals.
Exactly right. Love a bit of teal action, don't we? Phil, we have had a very active weekend, and you were a busy man on Sunday. Quite a few auctions, and I was busy on Saturday. I had quite a few myself, but over the weekend we had a big range of auctions in a number of suburbs.
And why don't we mix it up this week?
We're going to mix it up this week. We're going to mix it up in a couple of ways, because we've got no auctions coming up this weekend. So because
of the King's birthday.
Is it the King's
Have
birthday?
they officially changed it from Queen's to King's?
I'm confused about that. Well, today, you know, there's a whole mix of, it's a non-binary kind of royal birthday, perhaps, because you could identify one or the other, or, you know, have it however you want to, Phil. But they're the modern times we're in.
How good would it be? I mean, we've got King Charles now. And look, with respect to King Charles, he's not the youngest bloke going around, so I'm not sure his reign is going to be that long.
No,
and
it won't be as long as his mum's.
Of course, we wish you a long and happy life.
Yeah, of course we do.
But then it becomes King
Harry?
It'll become King William.
Oh, Queen Meghan, maybe.
But let's just say, let's fast forward maybe 50 years, because between Charles and William, that's probably 50 years of reign. Then it becomes one of Prince William's kids. And imagine if they do not identify as a king or a queen. I cannot wait for that to happen.
It could be a cat. Could be our first cat.
Well, I can't wait for everything to change. I love change. I embrace change. Change is good.
I find it difficult and awkward. I like things to. I like the stable. Hey, there was, a couple of weeks ago. I don't know if you heard about it.
And if I've upset any monarchists out there, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but the world is changing, and the monarchy will have to change with the world.
The monarchy's not interested in your opinion. You can't tell them what to do.
Imagine if I get a handwritten note from King Charles going...
He watches the show, you know that. He loves it.
Yes,
never misses.
I'm going to take umbrage with something that you said on GPTV.
No, I won't have that.
It's got a lot of good ideas, though.
Did you feel that earthquake about 10 days ago on that Sunday night?
Wow.
Did you feel it?
Wow.
I felt the earth move under my feet, as in the words of wonderful Carole King. She said it was pretty scary. Phil, just for a minute. Were you up?
Well,
it was late.
I was.
It's like 11 o'clock. No, for you.
I was up, and the whole house trembled, and I went running around the house looking for an insurance claim.
Well, that's what happened. Cheap construction, it looks like your house will be sold.
Check your policies, viewers, because some of your insurance policies exclude earthquake damage because they claim it's an act of God. Maybe it's just the planet giving us a warning that you need to get your house in order, metaphorically, I say.
Phil, we are going to not be the ones to wrap the auctions. We're going to change it up a little bit. We're going to throw over to our auction report of the week. We're going to have a few auction reporters of the week.
I like this idea.
I like the idea too. So it's going to be over to one of the partners of our business who's also been on GPTV and quite an icon and identity in the real estate world. Let's get a wrap of the auctions for the weekend just past from Joel Sir.
Thanks, Gary and Phil. What an incredible weekend the team had. We sold a whopping 19 out of 21 homes. So let's get those towers up because that is a 90% clearance rate against the industry average of 74%. There were a few standout auctions, and really encouraging to see that we did have some competitive bidding across a few of them. 3 at 17 Hewarden Road in St Kilda East, which saw 5 bidders competing for this 2-bedroom 70s apartment in a beautiful tree-lined street, and that sold for $592. Then at the same time, Gary, you were doing the apartment at 1 at 6 to 10 Lansdowne Road in St Kilda East. That was a 2-bedroom modern apartment with its own private entrance into a gorgeous courtyard, and that sold for $640,000. Then later in the day, we did have 21 Myrtle Street in St Kilda East. That was a 4-bedroom, single-fronted, beautiful weatherboard home with a modern extension. 2 bidders competing for that home, and that one sold for $1,925,000. Our feature auction, though, would have had to have been 14 Begonia Road in Gardenvale. That was a gorgeous 5-bedroom weatherboard home selling for $2,155,000. There really is a short supply for properties in Gardenvale and Elstonwick, and there is such a strong demand. So if anyone is selling in those areas, feel free to give anyone at Gary Peer a call. I'd like to finish off talking about 2 properties that we did sell in the Golden Mile. The first one is 28 Fosbury Avenue in Caulfield North. That was a 6-bedroom home on 744 square metres. And we also did sell 48 Lumia Road in Caulfield North, which was a gorgeous 70s home, a bit over 1,000 square metres, single level, really spacious, architecturally designed. Unfortunately, I can't talk about the results, but they are worth mentioning as they really were special homes sold in our core area. So that's the weekend wrap. Thanks for watching. I hope everyone has a great long weekend, and back to you, Gary and Phil in the studio.
Thank you, Joel, and expert report there from Joel Sir, who's a partner of the business and is also the loving father of 2 beautiful boys and a seriously good operator, and we love him. And he's been with us for almost 20 years.
And we want to
Gary.
get some ratings on our reporters. I think we should get some, because maybe they'll just bump us off the show.
Feel free, viewers, to give us some feedback as to Joel Sir's report there. And quite frankly, mothers, fathers, aunts, uncles, children, best friends excluded.
Yeah, and any false email address will fire. We're going to have a different one next week too. We're going to have another different auction report. We're going to start doing that. And we're bringing some other people. We're bringing some other people in as well, Philip, because we promised on last week's show that we would talk about the realities and facts of the rental market, Phil, because the rental market, there's been a lot of discussion about it. There's a lot of controversy about it. These new laws, are they going to, these new imposts, I should say, these land tax imposts, they are imposts really. Are they going to affect the rents, Philip? Is it going to be a scarcity? Is immigration going to affect rents? All these things. What's happening right now?
What is the truth on the ground? And let's be clear, viewers, whilst Gary and I give you a sense of the truth, it's often...
What does that mean? What does that mean? We give you a sense of... Is that like Donald Trump saying alternate realities? Is that right?
No.
We give you a sense of the truth. Can anyone tell us, what is the sense of the truth? I'd like to know what the sense of the truth.
The truth of the sense of the truth, Gary, is...
Now we've got the truth of the sense of the truth.
It's our job to give the facts, but it's also our job to mould the facts in a way that become palatable for the viewers to keep coming back to the show. Gary, if we gave the viewers the clear, unencumbered, crystal clear facts, they'll be going to be turning off this show in droves.
You know what? Can you handle the truth? That's the reality. That's the question that we're being asked now, or that we're asking you. Can you handle the truth? Well, we're going to tell you some truths about the property management world and the rental market with our heads of department, Jenny Coy and Anthony Lee, who are real estate icons and legends themselves. Let's bring them on, shall we?
Let's do that.
Gives us great pleasure to introduce a couple of icons and legends of the industry. Well, I shouldn't say legends, because legends is like at the end of your time, but you're certainly far away from that. Anthony Lee, who heads up our property management division in the Carnegie Murrumbeena office, and Jenny Coy, who heads up the property management division in St Kilda and Caulfield, both here to share some insights and views, because they are on the ground, experiencing what's happening every single day, not just with our big team, but also with rents, with landlords, with tenants, with legislation. And I reckon you've had a pretty busy time over the last few years. Let's just pick it up and let's just go back, say, to COVID, because if we go back a little bit, we had, of course, just before COVID, the announcement of all these compliance laws. That was a lot of fun. Let's talk a little bit about that first, then we'll go into COVID, and then we'll go into where we are right now. Who'd like to go first to tell us a bit about the challenges of the new legislation? How many laws were brought in by our esteemed Premier to talk about what had to change with compliance?
About 130 plus laws was
Yep.
introduced, which was just a nice little addition to our workload for ourselves and for our clients. It was massive changes made, and we've had to manoeuvre our way through all these issues. And we've been very fortunate we've been able to get through that, but it's certainly been difficult, and we're very mindful of what our clients have been experiencing over the last 2 to 3 years with the COVID drop, then the recovery. So it's been a busy time.
I want to thank the Premier, because I'm scared that you would have been bored over that period of time, particularly working from home over the COVID period. Jen, tell us how it affected the team. All of a sudden, 130 new legislative requirements. Tell us a little bit about how that worked for you and for the team through your eyes.
Yeah, it was a lot to get our head around, Gary. We certainly had to manoeuvre ourselves quite quickly into understanding what was before us and what was coming.
Yep.
And then, I suppose we just little by little and bit by bit, we got our way through it. And we're just getting to, as of March this year, we've actually got through probably the main troublesome change, which was the gas and electrical compliance safety checks. So that's been the biggest.
The cut-off date was March, wasn't it? That's
Correct.
when it had to be compliant by, and I think a lot of agents are behind. I know that we're not, thankfully, and we brought in some extra resources to help us through that, but thank you to both of you and to the team. Let's move on to COVID. We had the COVID period of time. All of a sudden, people don't know if they're employed anymore. They don't know if they've got jobs. They don't know if they've got income. Landlords don't know if they've got any rent coming in. Tell us a little bit, and of course, even our own people didn't know about their own security. Tell us a little bit about your reflections on that time. It wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, that was actually quite a scary time. Certainly looking as to see what would happen in the marketplace with a lot of, particularly in our St Kilda Caulfield area, we had a lot of immigration. There was a lot of people that just left the country almost immediately, and that really put a big dent around the Elwood St Kilda area in regard to vacancies.
What did the rent drop when COVID sort of hit us in that area?
It was easily anywhere between 30 to 50% in rental. You would take a hit.
Now, Anthony was on the other side of the racecourse having himself a happy little time, because it wasn't quite, it must have been a shock for you and for your team as well. Tell us a bit about how the rents were and how you handled the team over that time and what their feelings were.
Well, I think we've got a very resilient team, which is great, because and we all supported each other and we got through that very, very difficult time. I suppose the Carnegie, Murrumbeena, sort of Bentley area probably wasn't as hard affected as St Kilda, Elsternwick, Elwood, because tend to be a lot less of the hospitality workers and the casual workers and the tourism, sort of those sorts of things. Carnegie, Murrumbeena, Bentley was pretty resilient and came back, but we probably saw 20 to 25% probably drop. Some blew out a bit more than that, but overall we've now in recovery mode. And we're now seeing, as in the media we're seeing at the moment, bouncing back.
Can I just ask, just to put some facts on the ground here, during COVID, the worst parts of COVID, what was the vacancy factor across the group?
Good question. How many vacancies do we have in St Kilda, Jen?
Well, so we actually went from an average of approximately 60 up to at our worst time we had 235 on the market.
So we blew out, just to put that into percentage terms, we blew out to a 6, 7 or 8% vacancy factor.
Yeah.
What are we travelling at now? What's the vacancy factor now?
We're at less than 1%.
So less than 1%. And what's the long-term historical vacancy factor as far as the two of you are concerned?
Probably around 2 to 3% would probably historically be, if you probably had it over probably the last 20, 30 years, probably average 2, 3%. So to be down at 1 or just below 1 is phenomenal, and that's just an indication of people not moving and places getting
we've gone from a glut to an absolute scarcity of opportunities for properties.
Absolutely. I was reading an article recently, because there's so much talk about rents going up, but I was reading an article recently where one commentator said, look, rents have gone up a lot, but they're actually just back to pre-COVID levels or marginally more. Is that the reading from your perspective?
Absolutely. I mean, probably just a very real life example would probably be if a rent might have been at about $500 a week, it could have gone down to, 380, 360. That was during the depths of it. And we're now probably up at 520, 530. So in some respects, it's really only gone up $20 to $30 in 3 years. But from the media's perspective, it might be that it's gone up by 20 or 25%. So you've got to put it into perspective what it was prior to and what it is now.
So that's going to be a pretty unpopular opinion, because the court of public opinion, being the journalists that watch this show,
they love it.
They love to report the fact that there was a person that was paying $300 a week in rent. They've now been given a rent increase to $450, and the media would say, "Oh, this is terrible, a 50% increase." But if they were paying $420 pre-COVID, the fact is we're just back to where we were.
And the other fact, I suppose, is that the owners never recovered what they lost. That's the other reality that seems to be missed out in the narrative. That so often is the landlord is the all-powerful, wealthy person, and the tenant is the oppressed person, which we know is really not the case. But certainly it was very, very hard for a lot of owners, and it continues to be hard for a lot of owners. I mean, sold a property just recently where the owner is not a person that inherited wealth or is wealthy. They saved, they took risks, they bought a property and another property to put their money in, something for their kids for the future. Now they have to sell because between compliance, the rent they lost in COVID, the effect of their business, and also all these new imposts, they just can't afford to hold the property anymore. And I think that we're going to see a lot more, unfortunately, particularly this land tax, we're going to see a lot more of that.
Are we seeing now, though, that because obviously this 130 odd legislative changes that, I really do feel sorry for you guys, because you were at the coalface of having to get all of this done. And if you think about it, 130 changes is enough to get your head around, but then you've got to explain to your landlords that this is not you have to do this. It's not compulsory. It's
not optional.
It's got to be done. So you've had the shock of the change. You've had the mentoring, I suppose, of your clients to actually get their head around the fact that it has to be done. So it's an enormous amount of work that we've now finally got that behind us. My question to you now that the changes occurred, we're now moving forward. Have a lot of those changes been relatively sensible changes?
Yes and no, I would say. There are certainly some aspects. I think when it comes to the compliance testing or the testing of the smoke alarms, those are required changes, because what we're actually trying to do is make every property safe. However, having to have them tested and tagged every 2 years, particularly on something that's a new build, it just seems ridiculous.
The other thing I would ask is just about property managers. Over the time of COVID and over the time of these changes, there's been a lot of people have left real estate and property management. Do we have any sense of the numbers around that or percentages? Any idea?
I think there's been some talk of 20% of property managers leaving the industry, and we've been particularly lucky. We haven't had the changeover of a lot of other agents have experienced, and that's been of a great benefit to our client base. To be able to speak to the same property manager, and whether they were at home during COVID or whether they were working in the office when we could, to have that stability has been very, very important. And in some respects, by having that consistent person to talk to, the consistent advice, I think it's really helped them get through it as well.
I've got to say that I disagree with part of that. I don't think we've been lucky. I think it's been as a result of your and Jenny's leadership, great leadership. I think it doesn't happen by chance. We have an amazing, stable property management team, and I know this is not an advertisement, but it is really an opportunity to share that, because we've picked a lot of business up from a lot of other agents. I'm sorry for them, but we've picked a lot of business up for a lot of other agents where, in fact, their property managers just kept changing. Yep. They couldn't get a grip on it. They didn't have the seniority of management and the great leadership. And owners have had enough of speaking to a different person all the time. They just couldn't stand it anymore. So it's certainly one of the great benefits. Tell us a little bit about how you're seeing things going forward before we go. We've now got this land tax. Have you heard much from your owners about that, either of you?
I think anecdotally we're getting, the phones have started to have a few phone calls where they're just saying it may be just getting a bit too much for them to do that and absorb another hit. There's talk about obviously, rent caps, and who knows whether that could possibly come in. So there's all sorts of issues, but the problem that we've got is that the rent can only be absorbed as much as the market's prepared to pay.
Yep.
And with council rates going up, water rates going up, insurance going up, land tax now, some owners who have never been assessed for land tax on a smaller property, now, that could be the sort of thing they just go, you know what, maybe it's time for me to get out. So there's a bit of pressure there for people saying it might be time to move my property on, which then will create less supply, which then will create another problem. So sometimes it's the law of unintended consequences, I think.
Can I just address that because it's really interesting. Governments love to regulate, and without having a crack at our current government, there has been a lot of legislation that has been brought through under the current government. One of our big problems when we look at this from a broad view is that the more obligations and taxes that we put on our small landlords, the less likely they are to buy and keep a portfolio, which then means who's going to step in to provide accommodation for those that can't afford it. It has to be the government then has to get into providing more rental accommodation. I just want to ask the question, what's the typical profile of one of our landlords? Because I think that a lot of people, particularly in government, have this ridiculous notion that if you own an investment property, you're a rich person that can take the whack. Is that typical of our landlords? Tell us about what does our typical landlord look like?
Our typical landlord is someone who is probably employed in a 9-to-5 job. As Gary said before, they've made sacrifices to be able to purchase a property, and then with that they have compliance, they have a great deal of, there's maintenance, they have to, the upkeep of the property, and so they're just a normal person who has sacrificed. They're not some greedy landlord or persona that has been put in front of, or to be made to be this greedy big person that's got all this money at their disposal. They're actually just struggling to meet their land tax commitments or meet their council rate commitments. And so for them, the only way forward is to be able to pass this on to their renter. And unfortunately, then it's just going to, again, create this vacuum.
So what you're clearly saying is our typical, we don't call them landlords anymore, do we?
Rental provider?
Our typical rental provider is a middle-class, hard-working person that's paid a price in order to actually acquire something. And generally speaking, correct me if I'm wrong, they've done this because they want to be able to retire and have some level of income that they've provided for themselves. So there is a big misunderstanding that rental providers are rich people.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think that probably statistically about 70 to 80% of property investors really have one property.
Yeah.
Yep.
So just as Jenny has said, they're mum and dads, or just people have just decided to make that bit of an effort. And the other biggest pressure that we've seen in the last 12 months has been almost most people's mortgages, whether it be their home or whether it be on their investment property, has doubled. So you can't keep absorbing and absorbing and absorbing. And if there's a rent increase that does go through, it assists. But at the same time, it doesn't really, I suppose, cover everything that's required.
And it's all trumped by the fact that a lot of properties haven't gone up. And in fact, some apartments, people bought off the plan, they've gone down in value.
So here's an angle that I want to take and I want to understand. The rental increases that we're putting through just reflect current market rentals. So it's not like if I've got a $300 a week apartment, the going rate is now $400. Yeah. So we're not putting them up to $500 because then they just sit there vacant. So there is a market level for everything. So if we believe in the market being efficient, rental providers will provide their rental accommodation at a price that renters can afford to pay, albeit no one wants to pay more money.
Absolutely.
Interesting, we had a fabulous letter that was written to Adam Bant, who is advocating a rent freeze. And this is actually a Green supporter who wrote the letter. It's fascinating. One of our owners. I'd love to print it off and send it out. But basically said, look, I've always supported the Greens. I've scraped and saved and worked hard to buy 2 properties that I wanted to be able to enjoy the income of my retirement. You're now asking for a 2-year rent freeze. Can I ask that you also advocate the freezing of council rates, interest rates, agents' fees, all of the other things that they've got to take into account, body corporate, owner corporation, repairs on the building, everything else, because they just can't afford to do it anymore.
And can I ask you, that person that wrote that, and you read the letter to me, it was really such a well-written letter. Was that letter written on their boat in the Mediterranean, or was it written from their house in suburban South Caulfield?
I think it was written from their house in suburban Melbourne somewhere, and possibly not South Caulfield, Phil, but maybe one of the outer areas. But it's interesting that this perception narrative really doesn't reflect the truth of the situation.
And going back to Anthony's comment, is that statistically 75 or 80% of landlords own one property.
That's it.
And yet the media gives all of this coverage to the 24-year-old that's sitting on their laptop in a cafe saying, I've got 16 properties.
16 rental properties that I accumulated because I discovered an app. A lot of people like that around, aren't there? No, not. Anyway, look, we just wanted to bring you on and let people know what the facts are, let people know where we are currently. So thank you for the update. A bit of a journey through the last few years, which have been very challenging, and but you've weathered the storm. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Jenny. Lived to tell the tale and guided our team with it, and most importantly, guided our clients through it, which we want to thank you for. So
lovely to have you on the show. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you.
Phil, great to have Anthony and Jenny on. They are really two wonderful leaders, and we're very lucky to have them. And between the two of them, they've had long-term in real estate and, of course, long-term with us, thankfully. So
I think those two are just amazing, because both of them have got huge amount of experience. But both of them, and I think more importantly, their team love them.
Absolutely.
And I think one of the reasons that we have very low turnover in that area is because those two genuinely not only care for our landlords or our rental providers.
Thank you.
But they really care for their team. And I observe that, when we have our team nights, you can just see both of them have this love and warmth and respect for the people that are working with them, because it's a tough gig. Property management is a
very
tough gig.
The toughest that's going around, Phil, that's for sure. And they are very attractive to their team, who admire and respect them as well. So it's a two-way street. That is a big wrap on this week's GPTV. No auctions to talk about this weekend. We wish you a wonderful Queen's birthday, King's birthday, non-binary royal birthday, however you want to enjoy it. Have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you next week on GPTV. I'm Gary Pearce.
I'm Philip Kingston. Have a fabulous week.